In that light of my walk, till traveling days are done.
Amen. Let's go back to the Green Book. I'll close it, but it's one song that we did, page 71, a song that we did at the relief cell back in the fall. Page 71 in the Green Book. If you're able or willing, will you stand with this song? We're just going to sing all together. The verses are different, but I think we'll do this.
Hallelujah, the great song is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. The thunder and lightning is born to the night. The blue wind just another little baby has told me of love that can break the powers of man. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Sweetness in the air and justice on the wind. Laughter in the house where the mourners find peace. And that's as you make my life happy life. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Peace for the captive and in the Lord. You breathe them together before. The little children will never cease, and they will dance and the lions will Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Will be that God your fear. The Lord watches on and your mother is here. The chocolate stream from the western it burns. The mother's saying on your Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and fly. Hallelujah, the great storm is over. Lift up your wings and
myself a song this morning, page 32. See if I can remember it, but you might know it. 32 in the Green Book. How many are familiar with this? All right, Krista and I will sing too. If you believe and I believe, and we together pray, the Holy Spirit must come down and set God's people free. And set God's people free. And set God's people free. The Holy Spirit must come down and set God's people free. If you believe and I believe, and we together pray, the Holy Spirit must come down and set God's people free. And set God's people free. And set God's people free. The Holy Spirit must come down and set God's people free. And I believe, and we together pray. The Holy Spirit must come down and set God's people free. And set God's people free. And set God's people free. The Holy Spirit must come down and set God's people free. All right. Who are our ushers? Our collectors? This one.
Rose gonna help her.
We need lots.
Can you put down the instruments and help me?
Yes.
These are all little MCC ones. You fill them all up.
Well,
Rose?
hopefully this will be
Rose gonna
right.
help. Rose gonna help. Go take that around.
And then a third one. What shall we do? Okay. Just to make sure, we've got MCC, Relief Organization, the Church Bag, and Global Family. A family in India. There she goes.
Email. I forwarded an email to you, James, that I was hoping you'd forward to the church people concerning global families.
Okay.
Would you do that sometime?
Here's Zoe.
Thank you, All right, over here.
You got one, Cal?
Whoa.
So it's Ty, that one's the church. You've got MCC. Cal's got MCC. Rose got MCC. I've got Global Family. What should we say over this? What do you think we should say? Do something with it? Thank you. That's your prayer for the offering. Thank you.
That's a great way.
And then those three go in the big bar.
We'll have to take that.
Oh, there it is.
Rose, I go home.
That was last time. I can't believe it actually blended in. Guide to money. I wish I was going to get guide to money. I'll go put it in here for next time. I don't know.
All right, don't go anywhere. Come here, just real quick, and then we're gonna go to class. Ty, can you come over here real quick before we go to class? Okay. February is Black History Month, and that just means it's a really good excuse to tell stories that we should be telling all the time, but for some reason we don't. So, you do? Good. Good. So this is a poem written by Rita Dove. I'm gonna read it. We're gonna act it out, and then the adults are gonna think about what the words mean. Okay? Does everybody understand what to do? All right. Y'all don't act it out. You think about what the words mean. But you all have to do this with me, whatever it's supposed to do.
what the words are.
Do you?
Yeah, what are they?
Well, I'm gonna read it to you right now. It's called Dawn Revisited. Dawn Revisited. It comes from a book called On the Bus with Rosa Parks. Imagine you wake up with a second chance. The blue jay hawks his pretty wares, and the oak stands still, spreading glorious shade. Everybody stand up and spread some shade. Stand up and be a tree. Cal, be a tree.
Be a tree. Look, do what Aaron does. Do what Aaron does.
Be a tree. Okay? If you don't look back, the future never happens. How good to rise in sunlight in the prodigal smell of biscuits. Smell the biscuits? Smell the biscuits, Rose. Eggs and sausage on the grill. The whole sky is yours. To write on, blown open to a blank page. Come on, shake a leg. Shake it. Shake a leg. Shake a leg. You'll never know who's down there frying those eggs if you don't get up and see. So look around. Who's frying those eggs? Where's that smell coming from?
How about?
Are you hungry now? All right. So y'all can go to class, and the adults are going to have a conversation about what that means.
All right.
Yeah, we're good. Rita, you ready to go play?
You're ready to play.
Little babe.
All right.
If you'll allow me to share with you a little bit about my classroom. This is not directly connected to Black History Month, although we're doing a lot of things at my school in February. But we just happen to be studying the Mexican-American War right now. And so I've been singing this song for like 2 weeks, and just thought I'd share it with you. So it really doesn't, there's no context at all, okay? So just kind of set everything else aside. But this is a true story. And by singing this song, I don't intend to promote violence at all. So take it for what it is. This is not like prescriptive, okay? But it's a true story about something that happened in the Mexican-American War. My name is John Wright. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. And when I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. It was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. So in the midst of these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We marched neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin go brag, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad en Republica. Just 50 years after Wolf Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, while their volunteers were hitting the nuns. In Monterey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom, midst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in 5 major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside in the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. Yes, we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. So as you can guess, that's not in my textbook. That story conveniently gets left out, but it's a perfect way for me to illustrate the politics behind the study of history. So thank you for just letting me do that.
Thank you for sharing of what you did at school.
That's one of my favorite songs. That's a really good song.
Fortunately, no principal walked in the middle of that one. Let's do page 91. I love this song so much.
What in?
In the Green Book again. I think we did this one time before, and I just conveniently changed the key. So Did those little dots make sense to you? Then try to transpose in your mind maybe. I just love this because it's an equalizing sense, and there's just not very many like this. 91. Like a mother who has borne us, held us close in her divine, let us freely from her body, God has always seemed to divine. Like a father who has taught us, grasped our hand and never gone, lifted us and healed our sorrows. God is walked with us in time. Though as children we are wandered, place our trust in power and might. Left behind our brothers, sisters, come to call us divine. When we offer food and comfort, Christ our neighbor's time to love. Stand our path of peace and justice, God shall walk with us above. Like a mother who has borne us, held us close in her divine, burn us freely from her body. God has called us into life. Let's have a prayerful attitude as that comes.
Can we get 4 volunteers who like to talk? Anyone else like to talk?
I can do one. I got it. Okay.
I'll take it, so just follow along. Thank you.
If you got a Bible, flip it to Mark 20, or I'm sorry, Mark 20. As if something like that existed. What a funny joke, you knew better than that. But Mark 8. Mark 8. That's not helpful. Try again. Let's do James and then Kristen and then who's John? Let's just read this. It's kind of long. A lot of the stuff I'm going to be doing this year is going to be from pretty big chunks of scripture, so just bear with me. Let's start with verse 27. James, can you go from 27 up until the first verse of chapter 9?
Okay.
And then after that, Kristen, can you take 9:2 and go up until verse 8, from 2 to 8? And John, can you read chapter 9, verse 9, all the way to 13? Okay. Let's do that.
Jesus and his disciples went into the villages near Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They told him, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "And what about you? Who do you say that I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Christ." Jesus ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then Jesus began to teach his disciples, "The human one must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and the legal experts, and be killed. And then after 3 days, rise from the dead." He said this plainly, but Peter took hold of Jesus, scolding him, began to correct him. Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, then sternly corrected Peter. "Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking God's thoughts, but human thoughts." After calling the crowd together with his disciples, Jesus said to them, "All who want to come after me must say no to themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. All who want to save their lives will lose them, but all who lose their lives because of me and because of the good news will save them. Why would people gain the whole world but lose their lives? What will people give in exchange for their lives? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this unfaithful and sinful generation, the human one will be ashamed of that person when he comes in the Father's glory with the holy angels." Jesus continued, "I assure you that some standing here won't die before they see God's kingdom arrive in power."
6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up to a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus.
As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. And then they asked him, "Why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wish, just as is written about him."
Sounds a whole lot to keep in your head at once. I was gonna go through Mark this year, just straight through, but it doesn't really work that way very well because we're just starting out, like, I guess, a big season of Christian holidays in the calendar. So today is Transfiguration Sunday, and then we get Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent, which will end with Passion Week, Good Friday, and then Easter. And so I was going to stop doing what I was doing and kind of hop around those places. And then when Easter's over with, we get back to going in order again. And it kind of works out well because I started with the beginning of Mark, and that's important. And this is like the key part right in the middle of the gospel. So it's good to get that. And then we'll talk about the end. So we'll have kind of the skeleton. So it's kind of nice, I guess. Yeah, the Transfiguration. This is usually it's usually two sermons, right? It's usually Peter's confession. That's one sermon, and then the Transfiguration is a separate thing usually. But Ched Myers kind of puts them together, and I think it makes more sense when they're put together, at least for me. So throughout his life, and before I forget, what Bible are you reading that translates human one correctly?
A Common English Bible.
I didn't know any Bible translated that.
Yeah, that's the reason why I like it. It does that. It's also more gender inclusive. It's a pretty neat translation.
Yeah. I mean, it's not correct, but I like human. That's where Ched goes, and I like it. So throughout Jesus' life, he's struggling to communicate. He is trying to say something that most people can't understand. He has a vision for himself and for other people, but many do not understand. His closest disciples are described throughout the entire book of Mark as not understanding. They don't understand Jesus. So you can treat the Gospel of Mark kind of like a comedy. There's all these fools surrounding Jesus, running into things, saying stupid things. But as I read Finding the Strong Man, I think there's something important that stands out in Ched Myers' interpretation, and it's that the story is written in layers. And we are one of those layers. We are part of the story. Jesus interacted with the people living in his world at his time. And that's the most that's the most obvious level. But the person who wrote the Gospel of Mark had a church, and he had friends, and he bumped into enemies, and he had a whole world that he lived in, which is not exactly the same as Jesus's. And so he's interacting with the second generation of disciples. And so that's a second level. And then there's the mere fact that he wasn't just talking to the people that he knew, he was writing it down, which is a meaningful thing to do today. It was even more meaningful back then. The author of Mark was writing this stuff down, which means he has future generations in mind. And that's our third level. So there's three levels that this story is supposed to be operating on. It doesn't happen to be operating on those levels. Mark is intentionally writing with Jesus' world, his world, and some future world in mind. It's easy to focus just purely on the Jesus world and the people in Jesus' time. But we can also look at what Mark has to say to his world and to future generations, essentially to us. And so it's not a good idea to get too caught up in laughing at the stupid disciples, because Mark uses them as a stand-in for the church, for you. He writes his gospel in this looped fashion that I talked about before, so you can read it over and over again. And he does this because he knows something about humankind. We make the same stupid mistakes. Thousands of years forward back in history, we make the same stupid mistakes. And so Mark writes the story in a loop so that we keep hearing it over and over, so we can keep being reminded. When the disciples screw up, we're supposed to be reminded of how we do the same things. So don't only laugh at them. Yeah, laugh at them, but laugh at yourself. So how did the disciples screw up this week? They fundamentally misunderstand what Jesus is up to. When Peter puts his foot in his mouth, he stands for all of us. Jesus silences Peter with the same language. I mean, if you look at the Greek, the exact same language as he uses to silence a demon. And then he calls him a demon. He calls him Satan, just straight up. Whatever mistake it was that Peter made, that we also made. This is a mistake that Jesus took very, very seriously. And Mark is, I'm convinced, Mark is not going to tell you the bad things that Peter did unless his audience was in danger of making the same mistakes. Mark wouldn't bother telling you how stupid Peter was unless he looked around himself and anticipated in the future everyone else doing the same thing. What Peter did was he committed the crime of calling Jesus the Messiah and being optimistic about it. After he called Jesus the Messiah, he got a stern warning. Peter then got optimistic about Jesus' chances of survival, and that's what led Jesus to call him Satan. He rebuked Peter, and he said, "Excuse me, get behind me, Satan. You're setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If you want to be my followers, deny yourselves, take up your cross, and follow me." And because it's written in a loop, we're supposed to understand, this is supposed to be, you're supposed to be reading this over and over. And so you're supposed to pick up on the fact that Jesus is foreshadowing something here. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. He's foreshadowing the fact that Peter specifically doesn't do those things. Peter specifically fails the test of denying yourself, taking up your cross, and following Jesus. He doesn't deny himself, right? He denies Jesus himself. He doesn't take up his cross. He weasels out. He does whatever he can to avoid persecution. And yes, he does follow behind Jesus, sort of, but it's from a safe distance, not really as a true follower or disciple, but as a coward. Mark is setting us up to be even more disappointed in Peter than we would otherwise be. And the reason is, it's not that he just cracked under pressure. It was this pressure was exactly what Jesus was training him for all along, and he still fell on. But remember that it's not just Peter who has been training for this test and then fails. It's not just about Peter. Peter stands for all the disciples, and the disciples stand for us. We are supposed to look at ourselves in the story, and we're supposed to be seeing out of the eyes of the disciples. Mark invites us to fall into the story. And when we do, we fall into the shoes of Peter and the disciples. We're being prepared just like they were. When Jesus says something to them, he's saying to us, he's preparing us, and still we fail. Peter wants a Messiah who does not undergo great suffering, who is not rejected by the authorities, who is not killed, and who does not need to rise again after 3 days, because he never fell in the first place. That's what Peter wants. And we want exactly the same thing. We want that triumphant Jesus. And when we say we want those things, Jesus responds, "Get behind me, Satan." He looks us in the eye. We want to emphasize the greatness of Jesus. And our reason is pretty simple. We've identified with Jesus, we've called ourselves Christians, and we want greatness for ourselves. And if our identity can be wrapped up in someone else, we want that person to be a big shot. We want them to be great. We want to be followers of a great person, not someone who's not great. But Jesus rejects all that greatness ideology. If you want to become my followers, if anyone wants to become my follower, let them deny themselves and take up their cross. And Jesus is making clear this is not a path to greatness. Following Jesus is not a path to greatness. It's a path to a cross. He makes the point very emphatically, shouting at Peter over and over, like it's a main point, not a detail. It begins, to kind of summarize the whole story, it begins with Jesus asking about his reputation. And some say Jesus is John the Baptist, some say he's Elijah, but I say that you are the Messiah. Be quiet, Peter, stop talking like that. Peter says, you will not suffer and die. You're winning over the people, you're going to be a hero. Jesus replies, get away from me, you demon. If you want to follow me, that's fine, be my guest, but I'm starting a death watch. And so it's all very, very dark stuff. And after all this darkness, the scene switches to the transfiguration, which is anything but dark. But then after the transfiguration, Jesus returns to that original question again. And it gets dark again. It's more talk about suffering and rejection and death. And there's a lot you can talk about. I mean, there's all these very pregnant details in the transfiguration story that you could preach about. And I want to focus on 3 of the details real quick. Moses and Elijah are there with Jesus, who's dressed in white. Moses, Elijah, and the white clothes. In the Hebrew scriptures, when Moses went up the mountain, he was at a pretty low point in his life. The people he helped rescue were rejecting him and rejecting God. He got very, very fussy with the children of Israel around the time that he was up on the mountain. When Elijah went up the mountain, you remember the story of Elijah going up the mountain? That was when he was a hunted fugitive of the state. Everyone who was powerful was trying to kill him. And so he had to run out in the middle and climb up the mountain and hide. Their mountaintop experiences were times of deep depression. There were times when their life was being threatened. There's a big mob that was either seriously considering or actively hunting them down to kill them. Mountaintop experiences, it's not a mountaintop experience in our common usage, right? And the other detail is that Jesus is dressed in white. There's a couple different ways you could interpret the white clothes. One of them, which is not a stretch at all if you look around the rest of the Bible, white clothes is what martyrs wear, people who've been or didn't killed. With the transfiguration, we're allowed to see a vision that Jesus has. We're allowed to see the world as Jesus imagines it. Jesus sees a significance to his way of the cross that Peter does not, and we usually do not. A martyr is symbolically dressed in white, but that is in this vision world. In the reality that we usually find ourselves in, it doesn't matter what the clothes of a martyr are colored, because they're going to get dirty and bloody and ugly and disgusting. Martyrs don't wear white in our reality. That's a vision reality. That's a different way of reality that Jesus wants to superimpose upon the ugliness. So you look at the context that Mark builds around the transfiguration. This dark, scary, painful ugliness with this little gem in the middle, this little moment of beauty in the middle of all the ugliness. I don't think it's an accident that the story is built in that way. None of it is pretty. Nothing around the transfiguration is good or wholesome. It's only within the context of suffering and death that the transfiguration can be properly understood. You notice that Jesus said, don't talk about the transfiguration to anyone. He said, don't mention it to anyone until after I've died and risen. After you've experienced the ugliness for yourself. That's when you're allowed to talk about this beautiful moment. Peter refused to acknowledge that context. They kind of talked about it when they came down the mountain, like, what in the world was that? But he couldn't really wrap his head around it. And so he couldn't see the vision as Jesus saw it. And we're in the same situation. We want to move quickly through the suffering and get to the resurrection. Mark knows this about us. He knows that we don't want to dwell on the suffering. We want to get to the happy times. And that's why he doesn't give us a resurrection in his gospel. Spoiler alert, there's no resurrection in the Gospel of Mark. He leaves that part out. He only kind of hints at it. But he knows that to show it to us is not going to be helpful. We're addicted to triumphalism, and we don't need another dose, so he's not going to give it to us. Jesus wants to redirect his audience's attention, and Mark is trying to do the same thing. So as I was reading Binding the Strong Man, there was one other point that kind of popped out to me. And I think it kind of applies to our context. And it's about this confusion about Jesus being John the Baptist or Elijah, or those three characters are somehow overlapping, and people are confused about who they are. The passage starts out with a conversation about John the Baptist, Elijah, and Jesus, and then the passage ends with that same conversation kind of being wrapped up. So Elijah I see as being the outer frame that surrounds an inner frame about suffering. And that inner frame surrounds the transfiguration. Again, we have this framework structure. So what is this outer frame about? There's a tradition about Elijah that draws from the very end of the Hebrew Scriptures, and it's not really long, so I was hoping we could read it. Who's the fourth? Is it Donovan? Or anyone else can read it?
Isaiah?
No, it's the last chapter of the Old Testament. It's Malachi 4. You read the whole chapter. It's not terribly long.
Malachi 4. Surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble. And that day that is coming will set them on fire, says the Lord Almighty. Not a root or a branch will be left to them. But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings. And you will go out and weep like calves released from the stall. Then you will trample down the wicked. There will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day when I do these things, says the Lord Almighty. Remember the law of my servant Moses, the decrees and laws I gave him at Horeb for all Israel. See, I will send you the prophet Elijah before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse.
So you notice there's Moses and Elijah showing up again. So it's not a stretch to say that this is what was in Mark's mind when he wrote the Transfiguration story. But the other thing, like, is that NIV that you had? Yeah. That last line, he will turn the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents. I would rather say, so that I will not come and strike the land with the curse. There's an idea that was popular with the scribes and their followers that Elijah functioned kind of like the rapture does for evangelicals today. There's this promise that, yes, there's going to be a terrible judgment. It's going to be really scary, lots of tribulation, but it won't touch you, because before Judgment Day, Elijah will come back and he will clean you up so that you don't have to be judged, and he'll rescue you. And so what I did, recently I've become Facebook friends with Ched Myers, and I kind of asked him, because I thought this might be a stretch, but he kind of likes this idea. Elijah kind of functions for them like the rapture does today. This idea of we don't have to be judged. The issue is not whether or not Elijah physically returns before the judgment day, nor is the issue whether or not a physical rapture is going to take place for us. The issue is about responsibility. If these beliefs about Elijah or beliefs about the rapture act like get out of jail free cards that allow us to mistreat each other without feeling guilty, then they are bad beliefs. Whether or not they're factually true, they're bad beliefs. And the same can be said, I think, for the doctrine of grace. This is a popular one. If you believe that God saves you by grace, and it's nothing you can earn, then that's a wonderful belief, that's fine. But if that grace belief makes you feel better about your bad behavior, encourages you to do more bad behavior because I'm saved by grace, then it's a bad belief. And that's how the Elijah belief functioned for some people back then. It made us feel good about ourselves. God loves us and won't hurt us. But you people are going to be judged. It was cheap grace for them. So what Jesus says here, if I translate it to our modern day, He says, I'm sure that you've heard the scribes tell you about the rapture. They say judgment day is coming, but if you side with them, Elijah will magically protect you. But I tell you, we all saw Elijah. You remember, he went by the name of John the Baptist. He set out to restore the hearts of the people, but they locked him up and killed him. That was it. That was the rapture, and we all missed it. So now you're stuck with me. Judgment day and the way of the cross. So for us, the question is, what do we do with that idea of having missed the rapture? Because that's, I mean, all the symbolism of John the Baptist has to do with Elijah. I think that's what's being set up. John the Baptist, in our language, represents that rapture moment. And Jesus is what comes next. The way of the cross, that suffering that we thought we could get out of. It's going to start up being Lent this week. And so it's real tempting to internalize or personalize the way of the cross and give up a bad habit. My cross is to give up chocolate or to stop saying bad words. That's the cross that I'll bear this Lent season. That's obviously not the sort of cross that Jesus had in mind. I mean, those things are fine to do. If that's helpful stuff to say to yourself, then fine. But that's not specifically what Jesus is talking about. He was not giving up chocolate. He was not giving up bad words. Jesus pushed society past the point of violence by standing for justice with the marginalized. He touched those he was not allowed to touch. He cast out those he was not allowed to cast out. He pronounced clean those society would prefer to disappear. There was something personal about what Jesus did, but something that was also outward and social or even political about what he was doing. It wasn't just giving up bad habits. And so I think it's difficult to really say precisely what it means today in America to deny yourself, to take up your cross, and to follow. That's a tough question. I don't really know what that means today. But I know it's not a call to greatness or triumphalism. It's not a call to blissful irresponsibility or cheap grace. And so my question, as I close, is, are we able to hold together the transfiguration vision of Jesus along with self-denial and the cross?
Just before we begin our discussion, I'd like to, for all of us individually, to kind of take stock, thinking back to, this is our reflection time. So take a little stock in the time that you typically speak during this time. And maybe a lot of us have done that before, maybe some of us haven't done that at all. So take this time to just think about that. And then what I'd like to do is to start our discussion with what I would call a new voice. And I'm almost tempted to just sit down and like leave it at that. Like, what does that mean? What is a new voice? But that might not end well. Number one, we don't want to sit. We just really don't want to sit here in silence for 15 minutes. But we might need to embrace like 4 or 5 minutes of silence. We don't want to speak to just